I go through these kicks periodically where I get really into playing a handheld, and I've been feeling that way a lot lately. And right now I'm on the PSP, which is a system that every time I pick it up and I tell myself, this came out in 2005, and then I turn it on, I'm blown away by what 2005 could offer. I mean, really what you got here is a PlayStation 2 almost in your pocket. That's what they kind of tried to market it as, and obviously it's not, but when you shrink the games down on such a small screen, they do look really good. And again, blows me away that this is 2005. This is before your iPhone, back in a time where, quite frankly, my family was personally still using dial-up internet, which is why the fact that this thing had Wi-Fi enabled right out of the box and had that functionality without a need for any sort of adapter, when the Xbox 360 that came out the same year did require an adapter, even though that was a home console. It blows me away, and it's also the reason why I was always, kind of sitting right on the edge of my yard trying to get my neighbor's Wi-Fi, because we didn't have that yet, and it blew my mind. The system has not received a firmware update since 2015, at which time it hadn't received one since 2011, so while it seems very unlikely we'd ever get another firmware update for it, we can't entirely rule it out. Regardless, the most recent firmware, 6.61, is easily moddable, making this system the ultimate kind of Pandora's box of being able to play retro games, take advantage of a ton of different features, and of course it's overshadowed by the PS Vita, a system that does everything the PSP does, as well as doing it faster, better, and on a system with a nicer screen if you get the OLED model. Now, of course, the PS Vita is a little bit more expensive, but at this point in time, I think that if you don't yet own a PSP and you want to go out and buy one, you want to get access to its great library of games, get a PS Vita, pay a little bit more money, and get access to the games in the PS Vita library. Now, the PS Vita library is not nearly as good as the PSP library. There will be people that will debate that, but the reality is the PSP library is huge. It spans 10 plus years, and while obviously that's the case for the PS Vita 2, there's a real slowdown after the first 2 or 3 years of the PS Vita being on the market, whereas the PSP went hard from 2005 until I'd say 2010, 2011. Things were still really firing on all cylinders, and for sure by 2013 it was starting to slow down for the PSP, but we got a solid collection of, I think, almost 2,000 games available on this platform in that time period, all of which are easily playable by modding your system, as well as being able to play, your GBA games, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, a little bit of N64, and of course, PlayStation 1 games all on the go on this system. The PlayStation 1 games, I know, doesn't have a dual analog stick, but, not all PS1 games are best played with the dual analog stick. A lot of them don't matter, and a lot of them just use the D-pad, and that's perfectly fine for what you're working with the system. So the great emulation of the PS1 that you get on this is amazing, but I think that the most underrated feature of the PSP in general is its video out. The fact that you can just get a relatively inexpensive, like less than $10 component cable that plugs into the bottom of any PSP model, except for the really obscure ones like the PSP Street, which you probably won't even run across. You just plug that into your TV using the 5 component jacks, and then you're able to play PSP games on your TV. The real downfall of this is it doesn't come up as full screen. There's my understanding that with a modded system, there maybe are some plugins you can get to really force it to be full screen, but at least out of the box, it's like a letterbox experience, which is, it's got some black bars around it, and it almost seems like Sony didn't want you to see the PSP game on the entirety of your 50-inch TV, because if you saw a PSP game on a 50-inch TV running on native hardware, not, upscaled in an emulator or something, you'd be like, this doesn't look very good. So it's probably better off left relatively smaller on your TV, but obviously much larger than it would be on the system, and then you're able to use the system as the controller, unless you have one of those fancy PSP Go's, and then you can connect a DualShock 3, a PlayStation 3 controller, and use it wirelessly. The PSP Go, in my opinion, not worth buying. Just buy a traditional PSP 1000, 2000, or 3000 model. Don't mess around with the PSP Go because it does have, obviously, internal memory, which sounds great, but it comes at a price. It's much more expensive, and it is a bit more of a hassle to deal with. I don't recommend it. But like I said, if the video out, which is a unique feature to the PSP, is not something that you're, enthralled with or really want, definitely just go with the Vita, pay a little bit extra money, get the Vita modded, and open yourself up to a larger library of games and better compatibility with playing those N64 titles than you're going to get on a regular PSP. Obviously, the PSP is known for its amazing library of RPGs, but what really gets me excited about this system is those old console ports. I'm talking about things like Battlefront 2, Tony Hawk's Underground 2, NFL Street 2, a lot of 2s in here, the Need for Speed games, the Burnout games, where they really tried to port a console experience with a lot of content onto a mobile system. And it seems like as the PSP's lifespan went on, we saw less and less of this ambitious porting of a console game, probably because at that point in time they'd moved on to the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, and there wasn't as much of a one-to-one maybe trade-off as they were able to do in the PS2 era. But to see those PS2 games that I enjoyed at home be ported onto the small screen while retaining a decent amount of the features, or at least the features that I cared most about, such as the instant action in Battlefront 2, just being able to play a custom game myself. I didn't care about the story. I just wanted to play, just a regular versus game. That's what they carried over. They didn't carry over the story. But that wasn't a big deal to me. And even the sports games, I thought, played very good. I mean, I was a big fan of Madden. I always have been. More so the NFL 2K series, but that obviously didn't make it onto this. But Madden 08 on this is one of my favorite mobile football experiences, as well as having a great port. And this frame rate can be a little bit shaky, but a great port of Blitz, the old Midway game. The Blitz game that came out on the Xbox and the PlayStation 2 back in the day, that got ported onto here as Blitz Overtime. And it does retain a lot of those features that were in the original console version. And just seeing that sort of one-to-one transition is really cool for me. But like I said, as time went on for the PSP, it seems like we got away from this. And a great example is the Lego games. You have Lego Star Wars 2 that came out when the system was, a bit newer. And that was a version that was built for the PSP. Same case with Lego Batman and I think Lego Indiana Jones. But you get past that, what you start to see are DS ports. And they did this with a lot of other games, that were maybe movie titles that were just, kind of spit out pretty quick, where they'd make a version for the DS, take Lego Harry Potter, for example, and then they would port the DS version to the PSP. And obviously the DS is a weaker, more underpowered console. Those versions typically were stripped of some of the features that you would expect in a console version. So then the PSP as a result was getting this weaker DS port. And one game that stands out to me is Split Second, where this was a game that came out relatively late in the PSP's lifespan, released on many different consoles, and yet the PSP version seems to be a standalone version made with the PSP in mind. But at the time when Split Second came out, this racing game, that was very rare to see. So unless the game was releasing exclusively on the PSP, you were potentially getting a DS port, and nobody really wants that when, again, the DS is the weaker console here. There are loads of great videos out there, lists on Reddit, and just overall documentation of the many different great games that came out on the PSP, of which oftentimes maybe swept through the cracks and you just kind of missed out on, or you didn't realize that there was a mobile port of that console game you used to play 15 years ago. There's a lot of that with the PSP, and I really like that aspect of it. But if you don't already own a system, again, I recommend checking out the PS Vita instead. Pay a little bit more money, get yourself a better system. But if you want a reason to revisit your PSP, just take a look at any, r/PSP post where they talk about some of the hidden gems. And you'll quickly realize that there are definitely some great games on this handheld that slipped through the cracks and you missed over the years. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video.